I'm Betty. I'm 32 years old and a mom who works. I live with my husband and our son. I started working at my current company right after college, and I've been there for 10 years now. I took time off when my son was born, but I returned to work when he turned 1. Since then, I've been working hard in sales, and because of my efforts, I'm about to get a promotion. Lately, work has been even more enjoyable for me. My husband is 3 years younger than me and has been changing jobs a lot since before we got married. He dreams of starting his own business someday. He believes that gaining experience from different companies will help him become a successful entrepreneur in the future. But every time he switches jobs, it seems like he earns less money. I've always wondered if he's really learning new skills. Still, I felt I needed to support our family to help him achieve his dream. I wanted to believe in the man I loved, but he did something that hurt me deeply. During the first 2 years of our marriage, things were good. Despite his job changes causing some instability, we enjoyed dreaming together about our future. We talked about building our own house and traveling abroad once his business took off. But after our son was born, everything shifted. He grew distant, especially once I went back to work after maternity leave. It made me see his true colors more clearly. He never liked doing household chores and avoided parenting duties. While I was on maternity leave, I managed, but once I returned to work, my days became incredibly busy. I'd wake up early to make breakfast, drop our son at daycare, work all day, then rush to pick him up, shop for groceries, and cook dinner. I was always on the go, wishing for help that never came. Despite having more free time, my husband refused to pitch in, even to drop our son off at daycare. When I asked, he worried it might look like he wasn't busy enough at work. I tried to reassure him that it's normal for dads to be involved, but he stuck to his reasons. To avoid arguments, I ended up shouldering everything between my early mornings, overtime at work, house chores, and childcare duties. I felt like I was being pulled in all directions, but I kept going for the sake of my family. It would have been helpful if someone could have talked sense into my husband. The only person he seemed to respect was my father-in-law, Phil, but unfortunately he was working in another state. Phil always understood and supported me, praising me for balancing my job and household chores, even during my pregnancy. However, shortly after our son was born, Phil was transferred far away, leaving his wife, Mill, at their home. Unlike Phil, Mill was more lenient with her son and always took his side, offering little help to me. As someone who had been a housewife for a long time, Mill seemed to disapprove of me continuing to work after having a child. Perhaps she was also bothered by her son's unstable job history. She didn't like that I, as his wife, was achieving success at work. She often made sarcastic remarks about me neglecting my duties as a wife and mother by focusing on my job. She knew that I was the main breadwinner for the family, yet at one point she even suggested I quit my job, claiming it was cruel to leave our son in daycare for long hours. Maybe with Phil away, she felt lonely. She would occasionally visit us, criticize me, and then leave. It was really tough being criticized constantly, but I tried to understand that older people with traditional views might find it hard to accept my choices. I tried to accept it, but it hurt. What hurt even more was that my husband seemed to resent my success at work. When I got a raise because of my hard work, his response was just an indifferent, okay. It saddened me that he couldn't even congratulate me. Things got worse when he started criticizing me, accusing me of becoming arrogant just because I earned a bit more. Both he and my mother-in-law kept finding faults with me. I began questioning why I was putting in so much effort every day and even started regretting marrying him. To add to my worries, my husband started coming home later and later from his factory job, sometimes not until late at night. He was supposed to finish work at a specific time, but he often had excuses for being late. Whenever I asked why, he'd get defensive, so I stopped pressing him. But his strange behavior made me suspicious. Then one evening my mother-in-law unexpectedly showed up at our house, as she often did without notice. That day had been particularly exhausting for me after a busy day preparing for my son's field day, working overtime, and getting up early to make lunches. All I wanted was to rest early for an important business meeting the next morning. My son was already in bed by the time she arrived, but her presence meant I couldn't just go to sleep. Feeling obligated, I dragged myself to the kitchen to make coffee for my mother-in-law. Suddenly my husband grabbed my arm, surprising me. He offered to do it himself, which was rare because he usually left all the household chores to me, no matter how tired I was from work. I thought he was just showing off in front of my mother-in-law, pretending to be helpful. I tried to ignore him and continue, but he held onto my arm firmly and insisted that I sit and rest, possibly guiding me to the couch. I felt stuck. If I let him make the coffee, my mother-in-law might criticize me for bossing him around. However, to my surprise, even she told me to relax and let him do it, smiling at me. While I talked with her, my husband went to the kitchen and started making coffee. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It was unusual for both of them to be so kind suddenly. What was going on today? As I wondered, my husband brought over a tray of coffee cups with a smile and offered me one. I thanked him but kept watching him closely. He kept glancing at me, and even my mother-in-law seemed unusually restless. Something was definitely not right. As I lifted the cup to take a sip, I suddenly realized they were up to something. There was a hidden motive behind their sudden kindness, and I wasn't going to fall for it. I decided it was time to take action. All right, they better be prepared. I'm not holding back anymore. I held up the cup in front of me and paused just before drinking. Turning to my husband, I asked casually, "Do we have any cookies? Should we bring some out?" It was unusual for him to serve snacks to guests, but since he had insisted I relax, he would have to get the cookies. At first he seemed confused, but as expected he nodded and went to the kitchen to fetch them. My mother-in-law apologized and followed him to the kitchen. This was my chance. When my husband returned with the cookies, I finally took a sip of my coffee. My mother-in-law sat beside me and started drinking her coffee too. We chatted for a while, and I showed her a video of our son's field day. Throughout, both my husband and mother-in-law kept giving me odd looks. Despite their intense stares, I kept a straight face and continued sipping my coffee. Seeing my calm demeanor, my husband looked puzzled. Just when I thought things would settle down, something unexpected happened. My mother-in-law suddenly turned pale, stood up abruptly, and hurried out of the living room, clutching her stomach as she rushed towards the bathroom. As I thought to myself, I knew it, I glanced at my husband. He stood there, eyes wide with shock. Then he shot me a glare before rushing after my mother-in-law towards the bathroom. He banged on the door, shouting, "Mom, are you okay?" She was groaning inside, but her words were unclear. I could guess from her sounds, though. After a few minutes, my husband returned to the living room, leaving my mother-in-law in the bathroom. His face was pale, and he bit his lip nervously. I said to him, "Looks like you spiked my coffee, huh?" He shouted back, his eyes bulging, "So it was you all along?" I smirked. "Nope, it was you, right? I switched my coffee with your mother's because yours looked suspicious." "You're awful for suspecting me like that," he retorted. "Well, who's really the awful one here? I bet you put laxatives or something in there, didn't you?" There was some strange powder on the rim of the cup. It was too obvious. The situation with the white powder in the cup my husband gave me raised red flags. If he had been someone who regularly made coffee, I might not have been suspicious. However, he never did household chores, and my mother-in-law tended to take charge. Their sudden niceness and insistence that I relax seemed too good to be true. I watched my husband closely and was cautious about the coffee he offered me. Eventually, he confessed. He admitted he had planned to sabotage an important business meeting I had the next day by making me sick. If their plan had succeeded, I would have had to cancel the meeting or risk embarrassing myself by needing frequent bathroom breaks, potentially damaging my reputation at work. Putting something in someone's drink is clearly wrong and could be considered a crime. Did they really dislike me so much that they would stoop to such a level? I started to feel sorry for them. My husband, now defiant, glared at me and threatened, "If anything happens to my mom, I'll sue you for damages." But I responded with a smirk, "What are you talking about? If anything, you should be compensating me. I've known all along about your deceit." My husband stood frozen, caught in his lies. Despite claiming to work late and being busy, he had ample free time. On his days off, he'd leave the family and spend time alone, glued to his phone when he was home. My suspicions grew, so I hired a detective agency, and the evidence they found confirmed my fears. He had been posing as single, meeting a young woman at a bar, and starting a relationship with her by lying about his future business plans. The girl, naive and fresh out of college, fell for his deception. When confronted, he tried to justify himself, claiming he wanted to boost his self-esteem by dating a younger woman. I could imagine him boasting about his future success. If he had so much time on his hands, he should have been putting more effort into his work. Maybe it was always unrealistic to expect my spoiled husband to start his own business. Seeing his pale face as his affair was exposed, I made a firm decision. "Let's get a divorce. You'll have to pay me compensation and child support," I told him. Reluctantly, he agreed, but he added, "I'm taking half of our savings. I know you've been secretly saving money." I chuckled inwardly, knowing better. There's no money of mine to take. Most of the savings are from before we were married, which isn't subject to division. He looked puzzled and argued, "That can't be right. Besides, you've been earning money lately." "The money I've earned recently has mostly gone towards our living expenses, with you contributing very little," I calmly explained. Hearing this, he looked defeated. "And just so you know, all the furniture and appliances in this house were purchased with my money. You won't be taking any of it. Also, since the house lease is in my name, you need to pack your things and leave as soon as possible." Turning to my mother-in-law, who had just come out of the bathroom looking worn out, I told her, "I'll be informing your husband about this." She pleaded with me not to, but I proceeded to call my father-in-law, Phil. As expected, he was furious and urged her to get a divorce. Realizing he had no financial gain in the divorce settlement, my husband seemed to grasp the seriousness of his situation. "I don't want us to break up. I can't live without you, Betty," he cried, even kneeling and begging. But apologies now couldn't undo how I felt. I hired a lawyer and successfully divorced him, securing a substantial amount in compensation and child support. With a low income, he struggled to pay the compensation, ending up in significant debt. But the consequences didn't end there. I reported to the police about the laxatives in my coffee, leading to both him and my mother-in-law being found guilty of assault. They received suspended sentences but now have criminal records. In the end, my husband's affair fell apart, and he ended up working tirelessly to repay his debts. My mother-in-law also got divorced, and now they live a financially strained life together. It's a fitting outcome for someone who tried to undermine me out of jealousy, the one who held our family together. As for me, I recently closed a very successful business deal and was promoted to sales team leader. I've moved out of the apartment I shared with my husband and rented a new condo. My son and I are happily living together now. Though my first marriage didn't work out, I'll continue working hard and focus on enjoying life. Take care, everyone.